is a political truism that the best way to control the opposition is to lead it oneself, and today's globalist, anti-white left has succeeded far better than any other movement in history at implementing such a strategy. The rising generation of young white men are subject to a ceaseless campaign of psychological warfare by the hostile liberal elite, indoctrinated to believe that their ancestors were monsters and that they themselves are the enemies of oppressed humanity everywhere. Then, after searching for a political alternative to such animus, they encounter an ostensibly conservative opposition which discusses how minorities can become a part of its civic movement, while sanctimoniously stating that ethno-nationalism has no place in proper society. Under such circumstances, therefore, heritage Americans will never defeat the forces arrayed against them unless they have displaced this false conservatism. James Kirkpatrick, a columnist for VDare and the Social Contract Quarterly, spent years within this very conservative movement, which now no longer has a place for him. But readers of his book, Conservatism Incorporated, will benefit from his experience, for no one knows better the gutless, cowardly gang of careerists that operate within it than he. Kirkpatrick states that Conservatism Incorporated must always appeal to American nationalism and its populist, grassroots voting bloc to win elections. It is the simplest way to get rural folk to vote Republican. Once safely in office, however, the likes of Eric Cantor and Paul Ryan get back to cutting taxes for the rich, outsourcing jobs, stirring up proxy wars for international entities, while opening the floodgates along America's borders. He astutely observes that historically, the leadership within every political movement has been more dedicated to achieving its goals than the rank and file. Conservatives alone, however, are more enthusiastic about denouncing the most stalwart and energetic activists on their own side. The only possible explanation for this is that conservative politicians are not genuinely interested in hardball issues. If politics can be defined as the pursuit of power, then conservatives aren't really involved in politics at all, as they would rather persuade the general populace using universal principles and appeals to the Constitution. Then, while in office, they do not use their position to stamp out political enemies, for their conservative movement merely exists to consolidate and legitimize left-wing liberal victories of the past. Yet although no serious effort is made to defeat the left, conservative politicos do possess a highly developed acumen when it comes to climbing the career ladder within the movement. The periodic purging of those who directly challenge key left-wing issues is the preferred method for removing competitors within their own organization, and many often join the journalism cartel to become part of the false political dichotomy as highly paid, right-of-center mouthpieces. The rising generation of heritage Americans is faced with an increasingly overt anti-white sentiment and an imminent, entirely engineered crisis engendered by mass third-world immigration. The nation which should have been their birthright has been reduced, in Obama's approving words, to a hodgepodge. These young Americans have no stake in defending a limited government which had ceased to exist long ago, or a so-called free market made up of gargantuan monopolies that deplatform all who explicitly support the interests of white Americans. A true conservative political movement is one that will mobilize its natural base, the white working class that was abandoned by the left, and heritage Americans will desperately need a leadership able to channel their righteous anger into an effective political program that genuinely advances the country's interests while protecting them as a class and ethnic group. As Kirkpatrick himself admits, the existential issue of this century will be identity. The key challenge is resisting the death of the West, and the template to follow is the grassroots presidential campaign of 2016, which ultimately proved that national conservatism can succeed. In this, it must be noted that he merely refers to the Trump-Bannon campaign, not the president himself. Trump has flinched from implementing the policies that seemed implied by his campaign rhetoric. Some of his failures are due to his enemies within the deep state, but he has only himself to blame for failing to tax remittances and for increased legal immigration. Kirkpatrick is correct in assuming, however, that Trump shall prove to be a transitional figure in American history, and his electoral strategy should provide the blueprint for a consistent, nationalist-based conservatism in the years ahead. Conservatism Incorporated will likely prefer to run out the clock on Heritage America and garner the last few consultants' fees or board directorships for another election cycle. Once this has occurred, and desperation finally sets in, the dreaded specter of white nationalism will move from the margins into the mainstream, as the only political alternative to a permanently left-wing liberal, anti-white system. It now waits to be seen if the state and the establishment institutions have anticipated this development, and whether their reaction will be a cruel or diplomatic one, while we in the dissident right, however, must be prepared for either outcome.